She had one chance to let him die, one perfect moment to watch karma do what the law couldn't. But her hands moved anyway. Valentina De Luca wasn't supposed to be a waitress. At 27, she should have been a lawyer fighting for justice in courtrooms instead of serving wine to men who made their own laws. But 2 years ago, her brother Marcus was found in the East River with a bullet in his head. The police called it gang violence, closed the case, moved on. Val didn't move on. For 6 months, she'd worked at Giordano's Ristorante, the only neutral ground in Little Italy where the 5 families could break bread without breaking bones. She smiled, she served, she listened, and she waited for her moment with Marco Tesaro, the man she believed ordered her brother's execution. That frozen February night, her moment came, but not the way she'd imagined. She watched Dante Romano, Marco's most trusted advisor, slip something into the boss's wine. Poison, a betrayal, and in 3 seconds Val had to choose. Let Marco die and lose her only lead, or save the man she came to destroy. Her hands switched the glasses before her mind could stop them. Marco's smile told her everything. He knew, and now, so did the traitor. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Val's alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before Izzy needed to wake up for school. Those 13 minutes were hers alone, the only time in her carefully constructed lie when she could be honest with herself. She sat on the edge of her bed in their tiny 2-bedroom apartment on Mulberry Street and stared at the wall where she'd taped everything she'd learned. Names, dates, connections drawn in red ink like veins in a body. At the center, one photograph. Marco Tesaro stepping out of a black Mercedes, his face partially obscured by shadow. 2 years ago, they'd pulled Marcus from the East River. His Columbia Law School acceptance letter was still on the refrigerator when the police came to their door. Val had been studying for her constitutional law final. Izzy had been doing homework at the kitchen table, all wide eyes and braces, asking if Marcus was coming home for dinner. The detectives had looked at them with that particular kind of pity reserved for people in neighborhoods like theirs. Gang violence, they'd said. Wrong place, wrong time. The case went cold before Marcus's body went cold. Val didn't cry at the funeral. She made a different kind of vow. Now every morning she woke up and put on her mask. She made Izzy breakfast, packed her lunch with little notes that said things like, "You're going to change the world in math test, you've got this." She watched her baby sister, who wasn't a baby anymore but a brilliant 16-year-old with dreams of medical school, walk to the train that would take her to the private academy Val could barely afford. Izzy didn't know where the tuition money came from. She didn't know what Val did in the hours between dropping her at school and picking her up. She didn't know her sister had become a ghost. By day, Val haunted Little Italy like a shadow with a purpose. She'd learned to pick locks from a YouTube channel. She'd learned to tail someone without being noticed from a retired PI who owed Marcus a favor. She'd learned to read body language, to spot lies, to understand the unspoken hierarchies of power that governed these streets. 6 months ago, when the position opened at Giordano's Ristorante, Val had manufactured her entire resume, her references, even her smile. Rosa Giordano had hired her on the spot. Maybe she saw something in Val's eyes that reminded her of someone. Maybe she just needed the help. Either way, Val became invisible in the one place where secrets were traded like currency, where the 5 families came to negotiate peace and plan wars, where the wine cost more than most people's rent and every conversation could mean life or death for someone. She learned the rhythm of the restaurant, the language of power whispered over osso buco and whispered deals over espresso. She learned that Dante Romano always ordered his steak rare, that Enzo Capelli never drank during business, that Jackie Morello touched his wedding ring when he lied. and she learned that Marco Tesaro, the man she believed had ordered her brother's execution, was coming to dinner on a frozen February night. Tonight was that night. Val tied her apron with hands that didn't shake, even though her heart was screaming. She'd waited 6 months for this moment. 6 months of smiling at men who thought she was nobody, of serving wine to people who decided who lived and died before dessert. Tonight she would get close to Marco Tesaro. Tonight she would find the truth. She just didn't know the truth would find her first. The temperature dropped 15 degrees after sunset, turning Little Italy into something from an old film noir, all shadow and amber streetlight. Val arrived at Giordano's 2 hours before Marco's reservation, her breath forming clouds in the February air. Inside, the restaurant glowed like a jewel box, warm light reflecting off crystal glasses and polished silverware. Rosa was already there, directing the evening preparations with the precision of a general planning a campaign. "The private room," Rosa said without looking up from the seating chart. "Marco Tesaro, 8 o'clock, you'll serve." Val's pulse jumped, but her face stayed calm. "All of them?" "Representatives from each family, peace talks." Rosa's eyes met hers, then dark and knowing. "You be invisible tonight, Valentina. More invisible than usual. These men, they don't like attention, they don't like surprises. You pour wine, you clear plates, you don't exist. Understand?" Val understood. She'd been not existing for 6 months. By 7:30, the restaurant hummed with nervous energy. The regular dining room filled with neighborhood families, couples celebrating anniversaries, tourists who'd read about Giordano's in guidebooks and had no idea they were eating in the epicenter of organized crime in New York. In the kitchen, Rosa's son Marco, not to be confused with the other Marco, barked orders at line cooks while his hands moved in a blur of precision. The smell of garlic and wine and slow-roasted meat filled the air, almost enough to make Val forget why she was really here. Almost. At 7:58, the front door opened and the temperature in the room changed. Enzo Capelli entered first, 6'4" of controlled violence in a charcoal suit, his eyes scanning the restaurant like a machine processing threats. Behind him came Jackie Morello, older, silver-haired, his hands in his pockets and a smile that never reached his eyes. They moved through the main dining room toward the private space in the back, the room with the heavy oak door and the paintings of Tuscany on the walls. Val positioned herself near the kitchen, arranging wine glasses on a tray with hands that remembered their training. Steady, invisible, ready. At 8 o'clock exactly, Marco Tesaro walked through the door. He was younger than Val expected. 32, maybe 33, with dark hair touched with premature silver at the temples and eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. He wore his power the way some men wore cologne, subtle but unmistakable. He moved through the restaurant like he owned it, which in a sense he probably did. Rosa emerged from the kitchen to greet him herself, the only person in the building who could approach him as an equal. They spoke in low Italian, quick and familiar, before Rosa gestured toward the private room. Val watched from her position by the bar. She'd studied his photograph for months, memorized the angles of his face, the way he carried himself, but pictures were lies. They didn't capture the intelligence in his eyes the way everyone in the room subtly reoriented themselves toward him like planets around a sun. They didn't show how he paused at a regular customer's table, not rushed but genuinely present, asking after someone's mother in Italian. This man ordered her brother's death. This man smiled at grandmothers and approved murders with the same hands. Then Dante Romano arrived, and Val's attention sharpened like a blade. He came in at 8:15, deliberately late, his entrance calculated to make everyone wait. Dante was 45, handsome in that dangerous way some men are, with eyes that lingered too long on the waitresses and a smile that promised things he'd never deliver. He was Marco's consigliere, his most trusted advisor, the man who'd been at his side since Marco took over the family 3 years ago. Val had studied him too. She knew he lived in a brownstone in Park Slope. She knew he had 2 ex-wives and a gambling problem. She knew he wanted power the way some men wanted oxygen. She also knew something was wrong. Call it instinct. Call it the law school training that taught her to read body language during witness testimony. But something in the way Dante moved screamed danger. His smile was too bright, his shoulders too tense. His eyes darted to Marco and away like he couldn't quite look at him directly. Val picked up her tray and pushed through the kitchen door into the private room. The 5 families were already seated. Marco at the head of the table, Enzo to his right, Jackie to his left. Representatives from the Castellano, Russo, and Benedetti families occupied the other seats, men in expensive suits with faces that had seen things they'd never speak about. The table was set with Giordano's best, crystal glittering under the chandelier, wine bottles from Rosa's private collection already breathing on the sideboard. Dante took the empty chair beside Marco, apologizing for his lateness in smooth Italian. Marco waved it away, gracious. But Val saw the slight tightening around his eyes. He'd noticed too. "Gentlemen," Marco began, his voice carrying easy authority, "we're here because the old ways are dying. This neighborhood is dying. We adapt or we disappear." Someone from the Castellano side muttered something. Marco didn't flinch. Val moved through the room like water, pouring wine, her hands steady even as her mind raced. This close, she could see the scar on Marco's left hand, the expensive watch that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. The way his fingers drummed once against the table when he was thinking. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, standing this close to the man who destroyed her family. She'd imagined rage, hatred, the overwhelming desire for violence. Instead, she felt something she didn't expect. Curiosity. He was talking about legitimizing businesses, about real estate investments and technology, partnerships, about getting out of the drug trade and the protection rackets that were destroying the neighborhood. Half the table looked skeptical. Jackie touched his wedding ring, which meant he was about to lie or already had. The Castellano representative, a man named Luca with dead eyes and expensive cologne, smiled like a shark sensing blood. "Your uncle would be disappointed," Luca said softly. "These ideas of yours, this modernization." "My uncle is dead," Marco replied without heat. "The world changed. We change with it or we end up like him." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Val refilled Dante's wine glass and saw his hand tremble slightly as he lifted it. She saw the sheen of sweat on his upper lip despite the cool air. She saw him glance at Marco and quickly away, and in that moment every instinct she'd honed over 6 months of hunting started screaming. Something was about to happen, something terrible. She just didn't know she had 3 seconds to stop it. It happened during the second course, when everyone's attention was on the debate about territory lines in Chinatown. Val had just placed the osso buco in front of Luca Castellano when she saw it. Dante's hand moved with practiced efficiency, the motion so smooth it could have been nothing. A shift in his jacket, a small vial palmed from his pocket, the subtle tilt as he leaned forward asking Enzo a question about the wine, creating a distraction. And then, so quick Val almost missed it, the liquid disappearing into Marco's glass. 3 seconds. That's all the time she had between seeing it and the moment Marco would lift that glass to his lips. Val's law school training kicked in first. Evidence, witness testimony, proof. If Marco died from poison, Dante would blame it on the Castellanos, trigger a war that would consume the entire neighborhood. Izzy's school was 4 blocks away. Innocent people would die. The system would fail again, just like it failed Marcus. But beneath that rational voice was something darker, something she'd been feeding for 2 years. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? Marco Tesoro dead, the man who killed her brother gone. No trial, no lawyers, no justice system that had already failed her once. Just karma in a wine glass. Her hands tightened on the empty tray. 2 seconds. Marco reached for the glass, still talking, explaining something about construction permits and zoning laws. His fingers wrapped around the stem. Dante watched with eyes that tried too hard to look casual. And Val saw it then. The hunger barely concealed. The ambition that had finally found its moment. This wasn't justice. This was a coup, and if she let it happen, she'd never know the truth about Marcus. She'd never know if Marco really ordered it, or if she'd spent 6 months hunting the wrong man. She'd lose her only lead, and worse, she'd become exactly what she hated, someone who watched murder happen and did nothing. 1 second. Val moved. She stumbled forward, deliberately clumsy, her tray catching the edge of the table. Wine glasses wobbled. Enzo's water toppled. In the chaos of everyone pulling back, Val's hand shot out to steady Marco's wine, and in that same fluid motion, she switched it with Dante's glass 3 inches to the left. The whole thing took less than a heartbeat. Years of waitressing made her hands quick. Years of grief made them certain. Marco's hand closed around what had been Dante's glass. Dante reached for his own without looking. "Scusi," Val murmured, righting the water glass, mopping at the spill with her towel. "So sorry, signore. Let me get fresh water." She backed away, invisible again, just a clumsy waitress apologizing for a mistake. But as she served Marco his corrected glass, their eyes met for half a second. Something passed between them, something sharp and knowing. His expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation behind his eyes, the intelligence that had probably kept him alive in a world where most men in his position died young. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew what she'd done. Then he smiled. Just barely, just the slightest curve at the corner of his mouth, and lifted the safe glass to his lips. "To progress," he said, and drank. Around the table, the other men raised their glasses. Dante hesitated for just a moment, looking at his wine like he'd forgotten it was there, then joined the toast. He drank deep, probably trying to steady his nerves after the near miss of the spilled water. Val retreated to the sideboard, her heart hammering against her ribs. She counted seconds in her head. 1, 2, 5, 10. The conversation continued. Marco laid out his vision for the future, persuasive and clear. The Castellano representative pushed back. Jackie played both sides. Enzo sat silent and watchful, a loaded gun in human form. 15 seconds, 20. Then Dante coughed. It was small at first, just a clearing of the throat. He took another sip of wine, trying to wash something down. But Val saw his hand tremble as he set the glass down. Saw the confusion cross his face as his breathing changed, became shallow. The wine had been poisoned, but not enough to kill instantly. Probably meant to look like a heart attack later, after everyone had left, after Dante had time to establish his alibi. But he'd drunk from the wrong glass. A smaller dose, diluted by the wine already there, but enough. "Dante?" Marco's voice cut through the conversation. "You all right?" "Fine," Dante managed, but his voice cracked. "Just something in my throat." He coughed again, harder this time. His face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Everyone was staring now. Enzo half rose from his chair. The Castellano representative leaned back, calculating, already wondering if this was some kind of setup. "Get him water," Marco ordered, and Val moved automatically, filling a glass from the pitcher. But when she handed it to Dante, when he looked up at her with dawning understanding in his eyes, she saw the moment he realized what had happened. Saw him understand that she'd switched the glasses. saw him know that she'd saved Marco and condemned him with the same movement of her hand. His eyes met hers, and in them was pure hatred. "The hospital," someone was saying. Jackie had his phone out. Enzo was already moving, hand inside his jacket where Val knew he kept a gun. The room erupted into controlled chaos, men standing, chairs scraping, voices rising in Italian and English. But Marco stayed seated. His eyes were on Val, and that small smile was still there, like he'd just watched the most interesting magic trick of his life and figured out exactly how it was done. "Take him to Dr. Ricci," Marco said calmly. "Not the hospital. Ricci will know what to do." Enzo and Jackie half-carried Dante out. The other family representatives were gathering their things, the dinner obviously over, everyone calculating what this meant for their alliances. Luca Castellano paused at the door, his dead eyes finding Marco. "Interesting evening," he said. "Very interesting." "We'll reschedule," Marco replied, "once everyone's feeling better." The room emptied in minutes. Rosa appeared, took one look at the scene, and began silently clearing plates with the efficiency of someone who'd seen worse. Val moved to help, but Marco's voice stopped her. "Leave it." Rosa glanced between them, nodded once, and disappeared into the kitchen, closing the door behind her. Val stood alone with Marco Tesoro in the private room, the man she'd come to destroy, the man she'd just saved, and the weight of what she'd done settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. Marco stood slowly, adjusting his cuffs, his movements unhurried. He walked to where Val stood frozen by the sideboard and stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle. "That," he said softly, "was an interesting performance." Val's throat was dry. "I don't know what you mean." "No." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was solving piece by piece. "Valentina De Luca, Marcus De Luca's sister, Columbia Law dropout. You've been here 6 months, and tonight you saved my life from a man I trusted with everything." Her world tilted. He knew. He'd known all along. "Why?" Marco asked, and it wasn't a threat. It was genuine curiosity. "You think I killed your brother. You've been watching me, waiting for your moment. So why save me?" Val found her voice, though it came out rougher than she intended. "Because I needed answers, and dead men don't talk." Marco's smile widened just slightly. "Smart." He pulled out a card, set it on the table between them. "A phone number, nothing else. You're in danger now. Dante knows what you did. The Castellanos will figure it out. You exposed a traitor, which makes you either very brave or very stupid. I didn't do it for you. I know. You did it for the truth." He moved toward the door, then paused. "That number is my private line. When they come for you, and they will come, call it. I protect the people who saved my life, even the ones who came here to destroy me." He left without waiting for a response. Val stood in the empty room, staring at the card on the table, and realized she'd just changed everything. She'd saved the wrong man, exposed herself to the right enemies, and thrown away 6 months of careful planning and 3 seconds of instinct. Her phone buzzed. A text from Izzy. "Study group running late. Home by 10? Val looked at the card again. At Marco's number. At the choice she'd have to make. Outside, in the cold February night, the first snowflakes were starting to fall. And somewhere in Little Italy, Dante Romano was realizing he'd been betrayed and beginning to plan his revenge. Val didn't go home that night. She couldn't. Not with Marco's card burning a hole in her pocket and the weight of what she'd done sitting on her chest like concrete. Instead, she walked the streets of Little Italy until her feet went numb, past the closed bakeries and shuttered cafes, past the murals of old saints and older sins. The snow kept falling, covering the neighborhood in a blanket of white that would be gray and dirty by morning. By the time she picked up Izzy from her study group, She'd almost convinced herself she could go back to her plan. Forget tonight happened. Keep watching. Keep waiting. Stay invisible. Then she saw the black Mercedes parked across from Izzy's school. Val's blood went cold. She pulled Izzy close, keys between her fingers like a makeshift weapon, every muscle in her body ready for violence. But the car just sat there, engine running, windows tinted. Watching. A message that was also a promise. They know where your sister goes to school. Val? Izzy pulled back, studying her face with those two smart eyes. What's wrong? You're shaking. Nothing, baby, just cold. Val forced a smile and steered them toward the subway, feeling the weight of invisible eyes on her back the whole way home. Their apartment had never felt less safe. Val triple-checked the locks, pushed a chair against the door, and sat by the window watching the street until Izzy fell asleep. Around 2 a.m. her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You should have let him drink. Val's hands went cold. She deleted the message, but 3 more came in rapid succession. Marcus died quick, you won't. Pretty sister, be a shame. Tick-tock. She stared at Marco's card for a long minute. Pride said don't call. Instinct said you don't have a choice. Love for Izzy said swallow your pride and protect what matters. Val dialed the number. Marco answered on the first ring. I was wondering how long you'd wait. They're threatening my sister? I know. Enzo's been watching your building since you left the restaurant. 2 of Castellano's men. They're getting sloppy in their old age. A pause. Pack a bag. You have 10 minutes. I don't take orders from Valentina. His voice went hard. Your sister is brilliant, 16, wants to be a doctor. She deserves to wake up tomorrow. You have 9 minutes now. The line went dead. Val woke Izzy gently, whispered that they were going to stay with a friend for a few days. Nothing to worry about. Izzy, still half asleep, didn't argue. 7 minutes later, Enzo was at their door, 6'4" of silent efficiency. He carried their bags without a word and led them to a different car, a plain sedan that wouldn't stand out. They drove to a safe house in the Bronx, a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood that looked nothing like the luxury Val had expected. Marco was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with files spread out in front of him like he was preparing for a business meeting instead of harboring the woman who'd infiltrated his organization. Enzo took Izzy upstairs to a bedroom. The girl looked back at Val, frightened now, fully awake and understanding something was very wrong. Val wanted to tell her everything would be okay. She wanted to promise her the lies she'd been telling herself for 2 years. Instead, she just nodded, and Izzy disappeared up the stairs. Marco gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Val remained standing. You don't give me orders. No. I give you information, the kind that keeps you and your sister alive, so sit or pace or stand there glaring at me, but either way, you're going to listen. Val sat. Marco pushed a file across the table. Your brother's murder, everything I have. Val's hands trembled as she opened it. Crime scene photos, police reports, witness statements. Names she recognized and names she didn't. And there in the center, a surveillance photo of Marcus meeting with 2 men she didn't know, taken 3 days before he died. Marcus witnessed Luca Castellano order a hit on a rival, Marco said quietly. A lawyer who was investigating their money laundering operations. Your brother was in the wrong place at the wrong time, saw something he shouldn't have. He was smart, gathering evidence, planning to go to the FBI. Val's eyes burned. You're lying. I was in Milan when it happened. My uncle's funeral. I have customs records, hotel receipts, 20 witnesses. I didn't order your brother's death. I didn't even know about it until 2 weeks later when Dante mentioned it in passing like it was nothing. Like your brother was nothing. Then why didn't you do something? The words came out raw, broken. Because I'd just taken over and half my family wanted me dead for being too soft. Because Dante told me Marcus was a threat who'd been dealt with. Because I was drowning in a war I didn't start and couldn't stop. He met her eyes. Because I failed him. And you. And I've regretted it every day since. Val's hands clenched on the file. Why should I believe you? Because you're smart enough to verify every word. Because I have nothing to gain by lying to you now, and because... He pulled another photo from the stack. A young woman, maybe 20, with Marco's eyes and a bright smile. My sister Gabriella, she died 3 years ago from an overdose. Castellano drugs cut with fentanyl distributed in our neighborhood. I couldn't save her either. The grief in his voice was too real to fake. Dante was working with Castellano the whole time, Marco continued. Feeding him information, undermining my attempts to go legitimate, planning tonight's coup. You exposed him. Saved my life. And now you're in this whether you want to be or not. Val stared at Marcus's face in the crime scene photos. Her brilliant, beautiful brother who'd wanted to be a lawyer, to help people, to be better than the streets that raised them. He'd tried to do the right thing and it got him killed. I spent 6 months watching you, she said. 6 months believing you were the monster. I am a monster, just not the one who killed your brother. Marco leaned back. Dante knows you switched those glasses. The Castellanos know you interfered. They'll come for you, for Izzy, for anyone you've ever cared about. I can protect you or you can face them alone. Your choice. Why would you help me? Because you had the courage to save someone you thought was your enemy. Because you chose truth over revenge. Because... He smiled slightly. You remind me what it's like to believe in something besides survival. Val looked at her sister's door upstairs. At the files documenting her brother's last days. At Marco Tessero, the man she'd come to destroy, offering her the one thing she'd run out of 2 years ago. Hope. What do you want from me? Help me take down Dante and Castellano legally. You were studying law. Use that. Build a case they can't walk away from. Give your brother the justice the system denied him. And if I refuse, then I keep you and Izzy safe until the war is over and you go back to your life. But you'll never know if you could have made a difference. You'll never know if Marcus died for nothing, or if his death could mean something. Val sat in that kitchen at 3 a.m. in a safe house in the Bronx with the man she'd planned to destroy and the truth she'd been running from. Outside, snow was still falling. Somewhere Dante was alive and planning revenge. Somewhere the people who killed Marcus were laughing, thinking they'd gotten away with it. She thought about her brother's face, about Izzy sleeping upstairs, about the choice between vengeance and justice, between becoming what she hunted or becoming what Marcus wanted her to be. I have conditions, Val said finally. Marco smiled. I'd expect nothing less. Complete access to your files, no lies. And when this is over, you let me walk away clean. Done. And you start getting out of the life, really out. No more violence, no more... She gestured at everything he represented. I'm trying. That's what tonight's dinner was about. That's why Dante wanted me dead. He met her eyes. I inherited my uncle's empire. I didn't choose this. But I can choose what I do with it. I am choosing. You switching those glasses gave me a chance to see it through. Val stood exhausted and wired and terrified and determined all at once. I'm not your soldier, I'm not your ally. I'm someone using you to get justice for my brother. Don't mistake that for anything else. I wouldn't dream of it. She moved toward the stairs, then stopped. He would have liked this, you know. Marcus, not the mob stuff, but the idea of taking them down from inside, legally, making the system work even when it failed. Then let's make sure we do it right. Val climbed the stairs to check on Izzy, leaving Marco alone with his files and his conscience. She didn't know if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or finally doing what Marcus would have wanted. She didn't know if Marco was telling the truth or playing a game that would get them all killed. But for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't hunting blind. She had a target, she had resources, and she had something she'd thought died with Marcus in the East River. She had a purpose that wasn't just revenge. 3 days in the safe house felt like 3 weeks. Val verified every document Marco gave her, cross-referencing names and dates until her eyes burned. Everything checked out. The evidence was damning, intricate, exactly the kind of case a first-year law student would kill to prosecute. Luca Castellano had ordered Marcus's death. Dante had helped cover it up. Marco had been in Milan with dozens of witnesses. The truth didn't make it hurt less. It just changed who she should hate. Izzy asked questions Val couldn't answer. Why were they here? Who was the man downstairs? When could they go home? Val settled for half-truths and full hugs, watching her sister's innocence crack a little more each day. On the 4th morning, Val's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Not a threat this time, an invitation. Father Moretti, St. Anthony's, 2 p.m. Come alone. Val showed Marco the message. He frowned. Father Moretti doesn't get involved, not directly. You know him? Everyone in Little Italy knows Father Moretti. He's been at St. Anthony's for 40 years. He baptized half the neighborhood, buried the other half, and he knows where all the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. Marco studied her face. You should go. But Enzo drives you there and waits outside. St. Anthony's Church stood on Mott Street, old stone and older secrets. Inside, the air smelled of incense and candle wax and the particular kind of silence that belongs to sacred spaces. Father Moretti was waiting in the front pew. A small man with white hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human sin and somehow still believed in redemption. Valentina, he said without turning around. I knew your mother. She used to light candles here every Sunday, praying for your brother to stay safe. Val's throat tightened. She stopped after he died. No, she just stopped coming. I imagine the prayers continued. He gestured to the pew beside him. Sit, child, I'm too old to crane my neck. Val sat, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. You wanted to see me? I wanted to warn you. What you're doing with Marco Tesoro, it's dangerous, not just physically, spiritually. He turned to face her finally. Vengeance poisons the soul as surely as any toxin. I've seen it consume men stronger than you. It's not vengeance, it's justice. Is it? Then why does your hand shake when you talk about Dante Romano? Why do your eyes go dark when you hear Castellano's name? Because she wanted them dead. Because she wanted to watch them suffer the way Marcus suffered. Because justice felt too clean for what they deserved. What would you have me do, let them walk away? I'd have you remember who you are. Marcus's sister, Isabella's protector, a young woman who wanted to be a lawyer because she believed in the law even when the law failed her. His voice gentled. Don't let them turn you into what they are. Your brother wouldn't want that. Val's eyes burned. My brother is dead. Yes. And nothing you do will bring him back. The only question is whether his death makes you bitter or better. Whether you honor his memory by destroying yourself or by building the life he wanted for you. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of stained glass saints watching from above. There's something else, Father Moretti said quietly. Rosa Giordano. She's been feeding you information for months, hasn't she? Little hints about who meets when, which families are feuding, where the power really lies. Val's head snapped up. How did you? I've known Rosa for 40 years. I know when she's adopted someone. Your mother helped her daughter escape an abusive marriage 20 years ago. Gave her money, a place to stay, asked nothing in return. Rosa pays her debts across generations. He smiled slightly. She's been trying to keep you alive in her own way. But there are things she hasn't told you. Things about Marco Tesoro that might change how you see this situation. What things? That's between you and Rosa. I'm just an old priest who talks too much. He stood slowly, joints creaking. One more thing, Valentina. Detective Ortiz, she's been watching you, watching Marco. She thinks you're in too deep, that you've crossed lines you can't uncross. When she comes for you, and she will, have your story ready. I'm not a criminal. No, but you're standing with them. In her eyes, that's close enough. He blessed her in Latin, the old words washing over her like water, and walked away. Val sat alone in the church, breathing in incense and history, trying to remember who she'd been before grief turned her into someone who could switch poison glasses without hesitation. Her phone buzzed. Not a threat this time. Worse. Detective Nina Ortiz, NYPD, we need to talk about what happened at Giordano's. Come to the precinct voluntarily or I'll pick you up. Your choice. Val stared at the message, then at the saints above, their painted faces serene and unhelpful. She called Marco. Don't go, he said immediately. Ortiz is building a RICO case. She'll use anything you say against both of us. And if I don't go, I look guilty. You're not guilty of anything. I switched those glasses. I saved you. I'm living in your safe house. I'm accessing your files. Val's voice hardened. I'm guilty of something, even if it's just being stupid enough to think I could take down the mob with 6 months of waitressing. Marco was quiet for a moment. Then I'm going with you. My lawyer, too. That makes it worse. That makes it look like I'm protecting someone who saved my life. Let it look like that. Let Ortiz see that you're not afraid, that you have nothing to hide. Val wanted to argue. Wanted to do this alone the way she'd done everything since Marcus died. But the truth was she was terrified. Of Ortiz, of what came next, of how quickly her carefully constructed revenge had turned into something messier and more complicated than she'd ever imagined. Okay, she said finally, but I talk, my words, my story. I wouldn't have it any other way. The precinct smelled like bad coffee and broken dreams. Detective Nina Ortiz looked exactly like Val expected. 40-something, tired eyes, the kind of lean hardness that came from years of fighting a war everyone else had given up on. She gestured Val and Marco into an interrogation room with the enthusiasm of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Marco's lawyer, a woman named Elena Ricci, who looked like she billed more per hour than Val made in a month, sat beside them with a yellow legal pad and a pen that probably cost more than Val's entire wardrobe. This is informal, Ortiz began. No charges yet. I just want to understand what happened at Giordano's 4 nights ago. My client is happy to cooperate, Elena said smoothly. Within reason? Ortiz's eyes never left Val. Dante Romano. He collapsed during a dinner meeting. Paramedics found traces of oleander toxin in his system. Not enough to kill him, but enough to make him very sick. You were serving that table. Val kept her voice steady. I serve a lot of tables. Don't play games with me. 3 people saw you near Romano's wine glass right before he collapsed, including Mr. Tesoro here, who seems very interested in protecting you all of a sudden. Marco leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxation. Ms. DeLuca saved my life. Of course I'm interested in her well-being. Saved your life from what? From a traitor in my organization. From a coup that would have destabilized the entire neighborhood. From a war that would have killed innocent people. Marco's voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. She switched those glasses, detective. She saw Dante poison my wine and she stopped it. If that makes her a criminal in your eyes, then your definition of crime is dangerously narrow. Ortiz's jaw tightened. So you're admitting she interfered in an attempted murder, that she withheld evidence, that she's now under the protection of a known organized crime figure? I'm admitting, Val interrupted, that I made a split-second decision to save a human life. I didn't know what was in that glass. I didn't know who put it there. I just saw someone tampering with someone else's drink and I reacted. Bullshit. You're Marcus DeLuca's sister. You've been working at Giordano's for 6 months. You expect me to believe this is all coincidence? The room went cold. You investigated my brother's murder, Val said quietly. I read the case file. 2 days of interviews, 1 week of leads, then nothing. You closed it. Gang violence. Another dead black kid from a bad neighborhood. File it and forget it. Ortiz flinched. That's exactly what happened. So yes, detective, I went looking for answers. I got a job in a restaurant. I watched. I listened. And when I saw someone about to commit murder, I stopped it. If that's a crime, arrest me. Otherwise, I'm done here. Val stood. Marco and Elena stood with her, a unified front that Ortiz couldn't quite break through. This isn't over, Ortiz said. I know you're in deep. I know Tesaro has you convinced he's some kind of reformed criminal, but men like him don't change. They adapt. And when this all falls apart, when people start dying, and they will, you'll be the one facing charges, not him. He'll have lawyers and offshore accounts and ways out. You'll have nothing. She'll have the truth, Marco said, which is more than your investigation gave her brother. They walked out, Ortiz's glare following them into the parking lot. In the car, Val's hands shook. She'd just admitted to switching the glasses. She'd just painted a target on her back bigger than any Dante could create. She'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. You did good, Marco said quietly. I just confessed to interfering in a murder attempt. You just established your story. Ortiz can't prove you knew what was in that glass. Can't prove you had anything but good intentions. Elena will make sure of that. And when Dante tells his version, when he says I knew exactly what I was doing, Dante's version involves admitting he tried to poison me, which makes him either a traitor or a liar. Either way, his credibility is shot. Val leaned her head against the window, watching New York blur past. Somewhere in this city Dante was planning. Somewhere Castellano was consolidating power. Somewhere Ortiz was building her case, and Val was in the center of it all, no longer invisible, no longer just a waitress with a vendetta. She was a witness, a target, a player in a game she barely understood. Her phone buzzed. Rosa Giordano. Come to the restaurant tonight, alone. There are things you need to know about Marco, about your mother, about why I've been helping you. Val showed Marco the message. He read it, his expression unreadable. You should go, he said finally. Rosa doesn't talk unless it's important. Will she tell me things you won't? Probably, he met her eyes. I'm not a saint, Valentina. I've done things I regret, things I can't take back. Rosa knows all of it, and you should too if you're going to decide whether I'm worth trusting. That night, Val walked into Giordano's through the back entrance like Rosa instructed. The restaurant was closed, chairs up on tables, the smell of tomato sauce and garlic still hanging in the air. Rosa was in the kitchen making pasta by hand, her movements practiced and meditative. Sit, she said without looking up. This story requires pasta. Val sat at the worn wooden table where Rosa had probably prepared 10,000 meals. Watched the old woman's hands work the dough with the kind of skill that only came from decades of repetition. Your mother, Anna, Rosa began. She was my friend. Not close, but in the way women in this neighborhood are friends. We understood each other. We'd both married men who weren't quite what we hoped. She smiled sadly. My husband, he was connected. Not a made man, but close enough. He hurt me, hurt our daughter. Your mother, she gave my Maria money, a place to stay, got her out before it was too late. I didn't know, Val whispered. Children never know what their parents sacrifice for strangers. That's as it should be. Rosa cut the pasta into thin strips. When Marcus died, I saw Anna break, saw the light go out of her. When she stopped coming to church, I knew she'd given up. And when you walked into my restaurant 6 months ago, I saw her eyes in your face. Saw that same stubborn determination to fix what the world broke. So you hired me. I watched you, made sure you didn't do something stupid, fed you just enough information to keep you safe but not enough to get you killed. Rosa looked up finally. And I watched Marco too. Watched him try to be better than his uncle. Watched him refuse hits, turn away drug money, try to legitimize. Watched him fail more often than succeed because the world he inherited doesn't reward decency. He's still a criminal. Yes, but he's a criminal trying not to be. That's rare in this life. She brought the pasta to the table, simple pomodoro sauce, perfect in its simplicity. When you switched those glasses, you saved more than his life. You saved his chance at redemption, and maybe yours too. They ate in silence for a while, the weight of history and grief and hope settling between them. There's more, Rosa said finally. About your brother. About why he was really killed. Val's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Marcus wasn't just a witness to Castellano's hit. He was gathering evidence for a prosecutor, a woman named Sarah Chen. She was building a RICO case against all 5 families. Marcus was going to be her star witness. Rosa's voice dropped. Dante found out, told Castellano. They killed Marcus to protect not just Luca's family but all of them, including Marco's uncle. Marco said he didn't know. He didn't. His uncle kept it from him deliberately. Thought Marco was too soft, that he'd object to killing a civilian. The old man was right. Rosa met Val's eyes. When Marco found out 2 weeks after he took over, he was furious. He wanted to retaliate. Enzo had to stop him from starting a war that would have destroyed everything. Val set down her fork, appetite gone. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know who you're working with. Marco Tesoro has blood on his hands, but your brother's blood isn't among it, and because— Rosa hesitated. Because I think you're falling for him. Not love, not yet, but respect, trust, the beginning of something. And you need to decide if that's a betrayal of Marcus or the fulfillment of what he would have wanted for you. What would Marcus have wanted? For you to be happy, to protect Izzy, to use your brilliant mind for more than revenge. Rosa smiled sadly. He wouldn't want you to become what killed him. He'd want you to help people, maybe even people like Marco, who are trying to climb out of the pit they were born into. Val walked back to the safe house at midnight, her mind full of pasta and revelations and choices she wasn't ready to make. She found Marco still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with files spread out, planning their next move against Dante and Castellano. He looked up when she entered. Rosa told you. Everything. And? Val sat down across from him in what was becoming her chair, in a house that was starting to feel less like a prison and more like a refuge. My brother wanted to be a lawyer because he believed the system could work. He believed in evidence, in courts, in doing things the right way even when the wrong way was easier. She met Marco's eyes. I want to finish what he started. Build the case he would have built. Take them down legally the way Marcus would have wanted. That's going to take time. Months, maybe years. Then we'd better get started. Marco smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. Welcome to the team, counselor. 2 weeks in the safe house. And Val's life had rearranged itself into something unrecognizable. Days were spent poring over financial records, tracking shell companies, building a web of evidence that connected Dante Castellano and a dozen other players in a conspiracy that stretched back years. Nights were spent with Izzy, helping with homework, pretending everything was fine, watching her sister's trust erode a little more each day. Marco came and went, a ghost in his own safe house, bringing files and food and occasionally sitting at the table to explain the intricacies of his world. How territory worked, how money flowed, how loyalty was currency and betrayal was death. The Tesoro family has legitimate businesses, he explained one night, spreading out in corporation papers. My uncle started them as fronts, but they're real now. Construction, real estate, import, export. If I can phase out the illegal operations, convert everything to legitimate income, I can get out. While still controlling territory? While still protecting the neighborhood? There's a difference. Is there? Marco's smile was tired. I hope so. Otherwise, I'm wasting both our time. On the 15th day, Rosa visited, bringing cannoli and information. Dante's been making moves, she said, settling into a kitchen chair like a queen on a throne. Meeting with the Castellanos. Meeting with the old guard in your family, Marco, men who think you're weak. How many? 4 that I know of. Jackie Morello is wavering. He's been touching his wedding ring a lot, which means he's deciding who to betray, Val finished. I noticed that at the dinner. Rosa looked between them, something knowing in her eyes. You two are starting to think alike. That's dangerous. Or efficient, Marco said. In this life, there's no difference. She left them with intelligence and warnings, and Val found herself grateful for the old woman's network of whispers and loyalties. Rosa saw everything, knew everyone, and somehow navigated the criminal underworld without becoming part of it. She's remarkable, Val said after Rosa left. She's survived 40 years in Little Italy by being more valuable alive than dead. Information is power, and Rosa has information on everyone. Marco met her eyes. Including me. If you want to know my worst sins, ask her. She'll tell you the truth. I'd rather hear it from you. Why? Because lies and honesty sound different from the same mouth. Marco was quiet for a long moment. I've killed 3 men. One was trying to kill me. One was Castellano's soldier who hurt a 14-year-old girl in the neighborhood. The third, he stopped. The third was a mistake. Bad intelligence. Wrong target. He was a cousin of someone in the Russo family, and by the time I realized the error, he was already dead. Val's stomach turned. What happened? I started the rumor myself that he was a rat. Paid restitution to his family, ensured his kids went to college. Marco's voice was flat, emotionless. And I've carried it with me every day since. His name was Gianni. He was 23 years old. He wanted to be a chef. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know who I am, not who I'm trying to be. Who I am right now in this moment with blood on my hands and a debt I can never repay. He met her eyes. I'm not redeemed. I'm not even sure I can be, but I'm trying. And if that's not enough for you, say so now, before this goes any further. Val thought about Marcus, about justice and vengeance, about the line between them that was thinner than she'd ever imagined. It's enough, she said quietly. For now. The next morning, Dante made his move. Enzo burst through the door at 6 a.m., phone in hand, face grim. Castellano's soldiers hit 3 of our businesses last night. Burned them, 2 people injured, 1 critical. Marco was already moving, grabbing his jacket. Which businesses? The construction office in Queens, the restaurant in Brooklyn, and Enzo's jaw tightened. The youth center, the one you started for neighborhood kids. Val saw something dangerous flash in Marco's eyes. Casualties. Tony Rizzo was working late at the construction office. Second-degree burns. The restaurant was empty, but at the youth center, Enzo's voice cracked. Father Moretti was there, leading an evening program for teenagers. He got them all out, but... Is he alive? Barely. St. Vincent's. Critical condition. Marco's hands clenched into fists. Val saw the violence in him then. The part he kept carefully controlled. The monster he'd inherited from his uncle. She also saw him wrestle it back down, force himself to think instead of react. This is what Dante wants, Marco said quietly. He wants me to retaliate, to hit Castellano businesses, kill his men, start a war that makes me look as bad as he is. He turned to Enzo. Double security on all our people. Move the families we're protecting to safer locations. And get me a meeting with the other bosses. Not at Giordano's, neutral ground, a place Dante can't touch. Where? St. Anthony's, in the hospital chapel. Even Castellano won't violate that. Val stood. I'm coming with you. No, it's too dangerous. Dante's violating every rule, crossing every line. He'll target anyone you care about, which now includes me. I'm safer with you than hidden away. And... She grabbed her bag, pulled out a notebook filled with her legal analysis. I found something in your uncle's old files. A pattern of payments that ties Dante to Castellano going back 5 years. Before you even took over, before Marcus died. Marco's eyes sharpened. Show me. They spread out the evidence on the kitchen table. Offshore accounts, shell companies. Wire transfers disguised as legitimate business expenses. It was all there, a paper trail that proved Dante had been betraying the Tesoro family long before the poisoned wine. This is what Marcus found, Val said. This is why they killed him. He wasn't just a witness to one hit. He'd stumbled onto the entire conspiracy. Can you prove it? With subpoena power? Yes. With just this? Probably not enough for criminal charges, but enough to show the other families that Dante's been stealing from all of them, not just you. Marco smiled, sharp and dangerous. Then let's show them. The war started with fire. Val woke at dawn to Enzo pounding on the safe house door. A construction site in Queens had burned overnight. By noon, 2 more Tesoro businesses were hit. By week's end, 7 locations had been vandalized, burned, or shut down by sudden building code violations that smelled of bribed inspectors. Castellano was sending a message. Marco heard it loud and clear. But Marco's response surprised everyone. No retaliation, no bodies. Instead, he made quiet phone calls that resulted in DEA raids on Castellano drug houses. Health inspectors suddenly interested in Castellano restaurants. IRS auditors requesting files. He was weaponizing the system itself, turning bureaucracy into warfare. Val watched him work and saw the exhaustion creeping in. Every decision weighed on him, every choice between violence and strategy, between the man he was raised to be and the man he was trying to become. Izzy noticed it too. 3 weeks in the safe house had stripped away her innocence. She cornered Val in the kitchen one morning, arms crossed, eyes hard. We're not going home, are we? Val wanted to lie, couldn't. Not yet. Is it because of Marcus? Is that why we're hiding with these people? These people. Val heard the judgment in her sister's voice and realized Izzy had been watching everything, understanding more than Val gave her credit for. So Val told her the truth, all of it, about Marcus's murder, the investigation, the choice she'd made to save Marco's life. When she finished, Izzy was crying. I just want you back, her sister whispered. The real you, the one who wanted to help people, not hurt them. I'm still that person. Are you? Because the sister I knew believed in courts and laws, not mob bosses and revenge. The words cut deeper than any knife, because Izzy was right. Val had crossed lines she couldn't uncross, The question was whether she'd crossed too many. That night, Rosa called with information that changed everything. Dante's planning an attack. Friday night at Giordano's. He's going to hit the restaurant during a family meeting, violate the neutral ground, force everyone to pick sides. Marco went very still. Then we close the restaurant. Like hell we do, Rosa's voice crackled with fury. If I show fear, the neighborhood shows fear. This is our home, Marco. Mine, yours, everyone who's ever broken bread there. We don't surrender it to traitors. Silence stretched between them. Then Marco made his decision. I'll call a meeting. All the family heads. If Dante wants to break sacred ground, let him do it in front of everyone. Let them see what he is. Val spoke without thinking. I'm coming. No. He's already threatened Izzy. Already put a target on my back. I'm safer with you than hiding. She held his gaze. Let me help end this. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, couldn't find the words. Finally nodded. The next day, Father Moretti came to the safe house. He moved carefully, still healing from the youth center fire, but his eyes were sharp as ever. He found Val surrounded by legal documents, building a case against Dante and Castellano that would hold up in court. Marcus would be proud, Father Moretti said, settling into the chair beside her. You're fighting with law, not violence. The law failed Marcus. So you'll abandon it? Become what killed him? The priest shook his head. Your brother believed justice was worth the wait, worth the work, worth choosing the hard path over the easy one. What if the hard path gets people killed? What if the easy path costs you your soul? After he left, Val sat alone with Marcus's case files and her conscience. In 2 days, she'd face Dante Romano at Giordano's. She'd have a choice to make, gun or gavel, revenge or justice, the woman Marcus raised her to be, or the woman grief had made her. She pulled out an old letter Marcus had written when she was applying to law schools. His handwriting still so familiar it hurt. The world needs people brave enough to do things right, not just easy. Be that person, Val. Be brave. She folded the letter and put it in her pocket. Friday night would test exactly how brave she could be. Friday night came too fast and too slow all at once. Giordano's looked like it always did. Warm lights spilling onto the snow-dusted street. The smell of garlic and wine and Rosa's Sunday sauce. Crystal glasses gleaming on white tablecloths. But Val felt the tension the moment she walked through the door. Every person in that restaurant knew tonight would change everything. The main dining room held regular customers, neighborhood families who'd been coming here for decades. They ate their meals with forced normalcy, pretending not to notice the men in expensive suits gathering in the private room. Pretending they didn't know this was the calm before the storm. Marco arrived with Enzo and 2 other soldiers Val didn't know. He dressed for war in a suit that probably cost more than her old car, but his eyes were tired. 3 weeks of fighting a mob war with one hand while trying to stay legitimate with the other had worn him down to the bone. The other family heads came one by one. Old men mostly, with faces carved by violence and secrets. They nodded to Rosa with respect, kissed her cheeks, treated her like the queen she was. Then they disappeared into the private room where Val had switched the glasses 3 weeks ago. Where this had all started. Val wore her waitress uniform, invisible again. It felt like coming home and wearing a costume all at once. You stay in the main room, Marco told her quietly. If shooting starts, you get the civilians out. You don't play hero. Understood? Val nodded. They both knew she was lying. 8 o'clock. The meeting began. Val served wine in the main dining room, ears tuned to the voices coming from behind the heavy oak door. She couldn't make out words, but she heard tones. Marco's steady authority. Angry objections from older voices. the careful negotiation of men deciding whether to unite against a common enemy or tear each other apart. 8:30. Rosa emerged from the kitchen, moving through the dining room with practiced ease, but Val saw the tension in her shoulders. Saw her glance toward the front door every few seconds. 8:45. The front door opened. Dante Romano walked in like he owned the place. 6 men flanked him, all Castellano soldiers, all armed. You could see the guns under their jackets if you knew what to look for. Val knew what to look for. The main dining room went silent. Families stopped eating. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Everyone understood what was about to happen. "Rosa," Dante said, all charm and poison, "I'm here for the meeting." "No, you're not." Rosa stood between him and the private room, all 5 feet of her blocking 6 armed men. "You're here to violate sacred ground, to break every rule we've lived by for 100 years. Rules change," Dante smiled. "Old ways die. Time for new management." He moved toward the private room. Rosa didn't budge. "You'll have to go through me." Val saw it happening in slow motion. Saw Dante's hand move toward his jacket. Saw the calculation in his eyes. Saw him decide that killing Rosa would send the perfect message. She moved without thinking. 3 steps put her between Rosa and Dante, her hands raised, no weapon, just her body as a shield. "You don't want to do this," Val said. Dante's smile widened. "The law school dropout. The waitress who thinks she's a hero. You know what happened to your brother when he tried to be righteous? I know you helped kill him. I know Castellano ordered it. I know everything. And yet here you are, protecting the man you came to destroy." Dante shook his head. "Marcus would be so disappointed." The private room door slammed open. Marco stepped out, Enzo behind him, and suddenly the math changed. 6 Castellano soldiers, 4 Tesoro men, 20 civilians, 1 old woman, 1 former law student with too much courage and not enough sense. "Dante." Marco's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You want me? Here I am. Leave them out of it. That's not how this works anymore. New rules, remember?" Dante gestured to his men. "Everyone in the private room, now, or I start shooting civilians until you comply." Val saw it in Marco's eyes. The calculation, the terrible math of hostage situations, the realization that Dante had already crossed every line, that there was no reasoning with him, no appealing to honor or code or common sense. Marco raised his hands and walked toward the private room. The other family heads filed out, hands raised, faces grim. They'd been trapped in there when Dante arrived. Now they were hostages, bargaining chips. Proof that the old ways were truly dead. "In the wine cellar," Dante ordered. "All of you." They moved. What choice did they have? Enzo went first, then the other bosses, then Marco. Val felt Rosa's hand grip hers, tight and frightened and fierce all at once. "You too, ladies. Everyone gets a front row seat to the changing of the guard." They descended into the wine cellar, that cool darkness where bottles worth thousands of dollars lined the walls like prisoners. Dante's men herded them into the back corner, guns drawn, execution style. Val's mind raced. Law school had taught her hostage negotiation theory. Stay calm, build rapport, find leverage. But all that went out the window when you were staring down gun barrels held by men who'd already decided you were dead. "Here's how this works," Dante announced, addressing the family heads like he was chairing a board meeting. "You all see that Marco Tesoro is weak, soft. He saved civilians at the youth center when he should have let them burn as a message. He works with the feds instead of against them. He takes orders from a waitress. He's embarrassing all of you. He's trying to keep us out of prison," one of the older bosses said. "Trying to make us legitimate." "Legitimate is another word for weak." Dante pulled his gun, aimed it at Marco's head. I'm taking over the Tessero family with Castellano backing. Anyone objects, speak now. Silence. Val watched Marco's face. He wasn't afraid. He looked almost relieved. Like he'd been waiting for this moment, for permission to stop trying to be something he couldn't be, to just let go. No objections? Dante's finger tightened on the trigger. Good. Then it's unanimous. Wait. Val's voice cracked the silence. You're going to kill him without even telling him why? Without giving him the truth about Marcus? Dante's eyes swung to her. What truth? That it wasn't just about Marcus witnessing a hit. It was about the evidence he'd compiled on all 5 families. Evidence that would have destroyed everyone in this room. Val looked at the other bosses. Dante and Castellano killed Marcus to protect all of you. But they kept that evidence. Insurance, blackmail. They've been using it to manipulate you for 2 years. She's lying, Dante said. Am I? Then why do you have offshore accounts in the same bank as Castellano? Why do you have keys to safe deposit boxes in all 5 names? Why have you been skimming from everyone, not just Marco? She was making half of it up. Gambling that Dante's paranoia and greed ran deep enough to make it believable. She saw it land, saw the other bosses exchange glances, saw doubt creep in. I have proof, Val continued. Documents, recordings, everything Marcus collected plus everything I've found in the last 3 weeks. It's already with the FBI, already with Detective Ortiz, already with lawyers who'll make it public if anything happens to any of us. Bluff, Dante said, but his voice wavered. Is it? Then shoot us and find out. The cellar went silent except for breathing and the distant hum of the restaurant above. Dante's gun stayed pointed at Marco's head, but his hand shook slightly. The other soldiers looked uncertain, looking to Dante for orders that didn't come. Here's the real truth, Marco said quietly. Dante tried to poison me because I was going legitimate, because I was getting out of the drug trade, the protection rackets, all the things that keep us rich and dirty. He needs me dead so he can drag the family back into the darkness. The question is whether you all want to go back there with him. One of the older bosses spoke up. If what the girl says is true about the evidence and the blackmail, then Dante's been playing us all for fools. It's not true, Dante insisted. Then prove it, Val said. Open your safe deposit boxes, show us what you're hiding. Dante's face went dark with rage. He swung the gun from Marco to Val. You cost me everything, switched those glasses, exposed me. Turned Marco against me when I was trying to save him from himself. You were trying to save yourself, there's a difference. His finger tightened on the trigger. Val saw it happening, saw the decision in his eyes, saw the moment when he chose murder over surrender. Marco moved. He launched himself sideways, tackling Val to the floor as the gun went off. The bullet shattered a bottle of wine, expensive liquid exploding into golden rain. The cellar erupted. Enzo grabbed Dante's gun arm. The other soldiers opened fire. Rosa screamed. Val felt Marco's weight on top of her, shielding her, and realized he was still choosing to protect her even when it meant risking everything. The firefight lasted maybe 10 seconds. Felt like forever. When it ended, 2 of Dante's soldiers were down, wounded but alive. Enzo had Dante in a chokehold, the traitor's face purple with rage and oxygen deprivation. The other family heads stood against the wall, hands raised, terrified and alive and witnesses to everything. Marco pushed himself up, helped Val to her feet. You okay? She nodded, ears ringing, hands shaking but alive. Rosa was alive. The civilians upstairs were hopefully hiding under tables but alive, and Dante Romano was finally caught. Detective Ortiz burst through the cellar door 10 seconds later, gun drawn, a dozen officers behind her. She took in the scene, the bodies, the broken wine, and landed on Val. I got your message, Ortiz said. The one about coming here tonight, about bringing backup. She looked at Marco. I'm guessing this is the evidence you mentioned? Val had sent no such message. She looked at Marco, who looked at Enzo, who shrugged slightly. Someone had called the cops. Someone had made sure this ended legally, not with more bodies in the East River. Take him, Marco said, gesturing to Dante. He tried to poison me. Killed Marcus De Luca. Conspired with Castellano, I'll testify. So will everyone here. Ortiz's eyes widened. You're willing to testify? In open court? I'm done hiding. Done with the old ways. Marco looked at Val. Someone reminded me that justice is worth the wait. They arrested Dante and his soldiers, read them rights that sounded almost funny given the context. Paramedics came for the wounded. Officers took statements from everyone, including the terrified civilians from upstairs who'd hidden in bathrooms and coat closets and prayed. Val found herself sitting on a wine barrel, exhausted and wired and alive, watching the legal system finally work the way Marcus had always believed it could. Ortiz approached her as they were loading Dante into a squad car. You did good work. The evidence you compiled, it's solid. We can build a RICO case that actually sticks. What about Marco? That's complicated. He's cooperating, which counts for something. He's been going legitimate, which counts for more. But he's still guilty of things I can't ignore. Ortiz sighed. Talk to the DA. See what kind of deal you can negotiate. You were almost a lawyer once. Time to see if you remember how it works. 6 months later, Val stood in a courtroom watching a judge sentence Dante Romano to 30 years for conspiracy, attempted murder, racketeering, and a dozen other charges. Luca Castellano sat in the gallery waiting for his own trial, his dead eyes finally showing something like fear. Marco Tesaro sat beside his lawyer, awaiting sentencing for crimes he'd committed before trying to go straight. The DA had offered a deal. 5 years, eligible for parole in 3, in exchange for testimony against the other families. In exchange for helping dismantle the organization his uncle had built. He'd taken it. Val watched from the gallery, Izzy beside her, Rosa on her other side, 3 women who'd survived the storm and come out changed. The judge asked Marco if he had anything to say. I inherited a legacy of violence, Marco said. I tried to change it, failed more than I succeeded, but I'm grateful for the chance to try again. To maybe someday deserve the faith that people I respect placed in me. He didn't look at Val when he said it. Didn't have to. After the sentencing, after the courtroom cleared, Val walked out into the Manhattan sunshine. She had law school applications on her kitchen table. Columbia had agreed to let her reapply. She had a future that looked nothing like the revenge fantasy she'd been living 6 months ago. Izzy linked her arm through Val's. You okay? Yeah, Val smiled. I think I finally am. They walked home through Little Italy, past Giordano's where Rosa was already preparing for the dinner rush, past St. Anthony's where Father Moretti was hearing confession, past the streets where Marcus had grown up dreaming of better things. Val had her phone in her pocket, set to vibrate. In 3 years, if Marco got parole, he'd call. They'd made no promises, no plans, just an understanding that some debts took a lifetime to repay, and some connections couldn't be severed even when logic said they should be. But that was 3 years away. Today, Val had applications to finish. She had a sister to raise. She had a life to build that honored Marcus's memory not through revenge, but through becoming the person he'd always believed she could be. Someone brave enough to choose the hard path. Someone who believed justice, real justice, was worth the wait. Okay, this story has come to an end. If it touched your heart in any way, leave a like and share it with someone who also enjoys emotional stories. New stories are coming soon. Until then, I'll be in the comments. Let's talk about this ending.